biracial people with light-skinned daddies are fighting for their lives on TikTok, it's because I know plenty of biracial and mixed people, and they do not, regardless of their phenotype, they do not spend their copious amount of time. They do not create or craft a whole entire brand that, hey, look at me, I'm black. Hey guys, it is Julesy. We are back for another video, and I'm just gonna kick off and tell y'all right now, I am not feeling well. I'm not feeling physically well. I'm feeling mentally well. Do I really want to be here right now? No, because a young thug, triple vaccinated, got the booster, got the flu shot, all the vaccines, got breakthrough COVID when I went to dinner with my family in Atlanta. And there's just a lot of things that I'm currently upset about, mostly to do with the state of our government. But let's get into the title of the video, what you actually clicked here for. And what I need y'all to do is thank Audible. Thank Audible for me being here right now. Not only for me sitting down to do a video, but also for my ability to get to grad school and not off myself. I mean, it was horrible. It was horrendous. It kicked my whole ass. And I actually find the academy to be deeply exploitative. But Audible and finding some of my academic reads on Audible absolutely helped me get through this semester. So if you are new here, if you're new to Audible, if you haven't done it yet, first of all, I need you to join the book club. Join SBG Book Club. We might be hanging on by a thread right now, because, I've been down bad, okay? We might be hanging on a thread, but we are reading The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. Get it on Audible. That's how I get through all the books for the book club. That's also how I've been getting through a good bit of reading for school. Audible really be holding the young thug together. So join the book club. Then go to audible.com/Julesy or text Julesy to 500-500 and get your first month free. On Audible, a wide range of selections of original audiobooks, of some of your favorite titles. They have podcasts. They have so much content for you to choose from. So it's audible.com/Julesy or text Julesy to 500-500 and get into it, okay? And thank them, because you might not have ever seen me again otherwise, all right? To be honest. So let's make sure you can see the, I ain't even got the words to remember for my anatomy anymore. What you call this? Is it the clavicles? What's the French word for it? Okay, somebody put me in on that. Is it brain fog because of COVID? But let's now get into the topic of why a lot of you probably even bothered to click on this video. I'm Julesy. That's Jouelzy. You can find that everywhere across social media. Twitter, where sometimes I just engage in the discourse politically. TikTok, politically, but also just be talking a lot of shit. Instagram, that's probably the best place to follow me. And here on YouTube, subscribe if you're new. When the pandemic kicked off almost 2 years ago, and that's so wild to say, a lot of us picked up our phones and hopped on over to TikTok. TikTok has had a wild impact on social media, so much so that I probably don't even watch a whole lot of Instagram stories anymore, because so many stories are just reposts of TikToks that I could just go on TikTok and watch TikToks, But one thing that I have definitely noticed the copious amount of time that I've spent on the app is how TikTok has the biracials fighting. I'm telling you, they are fighting for their lives. And wait. Let me back up here because I have to be nuanced. The TikToks with the light-skinned daddies, they're the ones fighting for their lives on the app. All right? And what I mean by fighting for their lives is that they are really going hard at using race as a social currency. Their brands depend on the shock and awe of them using viral sounds to say, I'm half black, when they otherwise generally appear to not only physically be white, but based on the proximity of the people that they showcase them being in community with, white people. They are otherwise steeped in whiteness. Race is a very, very slippery slope to discuss. And because I know the internet is global, I want to remind y'all that I am approaching this conversation from a very American point of view. And in America, race works in a very specific way. And now in the communities that you come from, it might be slightly different, even though I'm sure a lot of what I'm saying can translate. But just remember, United States of America. Okay. Now, as I said before, race is a very slippery slope to discuss, and that is intentionally so. Because in the United States of America, race was constructed to keep a community in slavery. Broadly speaking, not even just in America, in the Americas, and in the broader Western world, race was constructed to justify the enslavement of a specific group of people and the colonization of said people. Okay? Are we still here? Race in America is historically based on phenotype. In the early Americas, as slavery was being embedded as an institution in this country, even though early Americas, I'm talking 1700s, slavery becomes fully embedded by the 1800s. So as this institution, as the system of slavery is becoming a institution built into the foundation of this country, race was quite literally used to define free versus slave status. And the impact of that can still be felt today. Where do you think things like colorism come from? So, as I already said, we are specifically talking about Black Americans with European and white heritage, though I will be using the term mixed and biracial interchangeably. United States of America, descendants of slaves in the United States of America, and white parentage. Now, I'm trying to be very, very clear with, the specific people that I'm talking about, because as I already said, race is a slippery slope, and that's done so intentionally. Race was never meant to become a thing that people outside of whiteness could use to their benefit. And that we got here and that we've evolved here. And in America, not only is Black a race, but to the magnificence of my ancestors, it is also an ethnicity. Now, people might want to tussle about the nomenclature, about how we self-identify. Is it Black American? Is it African American? Is it Negro? Well, no, it's not Negro because that's been out of vogue for a very long time. In the US, Black is a racial construct, it's a race, and it is also an ethnicity. As I stated in the intro, it was constructed to keep a community of people enslaved. Let's look at a celebrity with a light-skinned daddy, right? Some might argue that someone like Sofia Richie, daughter of one Lionel Richie's. She's a very white passing. I don't know. Don't she look? We're not gonna get into the argument about do she look white or not, right? But proximity, phenotype. She's leaning towards that direction. All right. And what would we even do with like Michael Jackson's children, who very obviously are white? But if we were to be able to do a better job, hypothetically, around differentiating between race, ethnicity, and nationality, it might not be as big of a deal for someone like a Sofia Richie to claim her ethno-cultural heritage. But because the language we use to define one particular ethno-cultural group is also how we refer to an entire race, someone like Sofia Richie claiming that she's a proud Black woman might stir some serious ire or raise some eyebrows amongst people. How would she even come out and say that? Likely would be in a way that she's trying to monetize her brand. She's trying to use it for a currency. So for someone like myself, I am racially Black. I am ethnically Black American or African American, because I do use the term African American. And my nationality is American. Now, the other thing with nomenclature gets messy is because plenty of Black Americans in this country do not like to nationally identify as American. They will nationally identify as African American or as Black American. And so you are going to get different people in this community who prefer different language to be used to identify them. But the problem is, for many Black Americans, we use the same term for ethnicity, we use the same term for race, and we use the same term for nationality. And as the internet brings all these global connections much closer, as people are immigrating and migrating, and there's a cultural exchange happening in this country on the internet where everyone seems like a snap away and they're tweeting from South Africa, we have to consider, the conversations get a little bit more convoluted, because it's harder, especially on the internet, to be able to distinguish, okay, is this person identifying as Black racially, ethnically, or nationally? And it makes everything very confusing. But what we see happening on TikTok is this phenomenon where we have white kids, or people that might present as most people as white, and they typically have a light-skinned parent, if that. I mean, sometimes it'd be a light-skinned grandmom, or just be a grandmom at that point. And they're speaking a disjointed AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English. And they're parade around telling everyone, they do like these things like, "Ooh, I'm the secret agent. Ooh, let me take my hat off. You can tell I'm Black. Oh, put it back on. I'm a white boy now." Or, once they get all the shock and awe and they go viral for doing that, and then they spend copious amount of other videos talking about how their Blackness is just as valid as anyone else, because look at these pictures of my Black family members. And then they get so much engagement and large followings and visibility from constantly using their Black heritage as like a gotcha moment. There are actually some really popular young men on the app in particular who every blue moon will either pull out their dad and be like, "Ha ha ha, this is my father." Or there's one in particular who did this whole, took off his hat in front of a crowd and then turned it back around and was like, "Yeah, I'm Black." And it's like, are you really? If you were in community with Black people, would you be doing this on the internet? So there is a difference between cultural identity and racial identity. I do think it's possible to know that you present as white and still culturally relate to the culture you grew up with, that you culturally grew up in the Black community. That is a culture. That is an ethnicity. And I'm not suggesting that because somebody is biracial or because they have white parentage, that they have no right to culturally identify with the culture that their family comes from. But what we do have to remember, what makes this using your Black parentage or your Black ancestry as a gotcha moment for social currency, is that this plays into what has historically happened with the Black community in America. That our cultural contributions that come from the African American community have always been commodified. And now, as we move into the broader African diaspora, we're also seeing a reduction or a bastardization of the broader African diaspora culture or cultural practices that are being repackaged for mass consumption. African Americans, Black Americans in this country, when we do have to go back to slavery, and we do have to understand that we were always capital in this country. This country built this concept of race around using the labor, not just the physical labor of Africans and what becomes Black people in this country. We got to go back to Hortense Spillers and this theory of, we were the pornotroping that happened in the transatlantic slave trade, where enslaved Africans are literally reduced to their flesh. And what Cedric Robinson would call racial capital, and what Dana Ramey Berry would call price for the pound of flesh. There are, this is a very, comes up a lot in Black history around the slave era, about how Black folks, it's not just our labor that's used for capital, but our actual flesh, our actual body parts are capital. And therefore, everything we produce is capital, from the children that are birthed, forced reproduction, from the care in community that enslaved people gave to each other that allowed them to live, benefits, the slave master, the medicinal care that might be had. I just did a whole paper on this because I was reading about Black motherhood, and I had to read Angela Davis's Reflections. And so this whole concept of, even particularly for Black women, that every facet of our life is work. Child rearing, child care, care of the household has always benefited white people, because the labor of Black people is what allows white people to live the lives that they live. Now, in the I'm talking about slave period, because now in modern times we have to consider that other communities have also come in, and that rung of labor, the domestic work, laundering, and childcare is not just Black people, but also the Latinx community has come in. A lot of people's lifestyles they're able to maintain based off of low cost labor, based off the exploitation of minority groups in this country. But to the point that I'm making is that we were always capital. If our body parts are capital, if the children we birth are capital, then obviously the culture, the music, the food, the language, the style, the cultural nuances, the cultural standards, every aspect of our culture was always tangibly accessible to white people to commodify, because it was structurally seen as their capital to take. That is embedded in the fabric of this country. And even with the dismantling and the emancipation of slaves, and then the civil rights movement, and all the progress that we have made as a Black community in this country, we still have obvious systems of exploitation that allow for the easy commodification of Black culture by white people. I mean, look at the music industry. Who's writing the checks? Clive Davis? Yeah, okay. And so, race is also a visual language, and it very much so gets exploited on TikTok. It doesn't even just get exploited on TikTok, even though what I'm talking about specifically a TikTok thing that has allowed it to flourish. But even when we think about, on Love and Hip Hop, Love and Hip Hop Miami, when Shayla Marie is talking about she wants to do a all Black women conference, and what is it, Noriega, some rappers, non-Black white, is like, well, I have Black children, I should be allowed to attend. We see the Shade Room about to post Danny Lee and her Black baby into Black womanhood. You know what I mean? Like, this proximity to the identity of having a Black child by a famous Black rapper, and having this huge fallout, and constantly being posted in reference to that within the Black digital space, in some people's minds, posted enough, and she gets absorbed right in. TikTok has mastered the exploitation of Black cultural products. And it goes from Black choreographers not getting credited for the dances they make, the overuse of sounds produced by Black people. I know you girls like to tussle. We have a hyper reliance on the Black content creator without the Black content creator really being allowed to profit from the way their dance, their image, their sounds are used on the app. And but another level of this exploitation is that people can use any proximity to Blackness, real or imagined, for social currency, also known as clout. And so what makes TikTok so fertile for this is, again, the algorithm, right? TikTok, as I said before in so many other videos, has one of the best algorithms out of all the social media apps. And unfortunately, I really hate that Instagram is trying to follow in this pathway of, now your timeline is going to show you other people you don't follow. But TikTok gives you the option to have one page that's dedicated to the people that you follow, and another, the For You page, where they service you a mix of people you follow and other content that they know you are interested in. And so that allows content creators to potentially also exploit the algorithm and decide what content is trending and immediately feed into that. And so with an app that is based on short form visual videos, that's a great way for people to use the visual language of race as a social currency. Part of that is that people can use any proximity to Blackness, whether it's them parading their black friend, their black child, their black partner. You know, on the partner front, there are some black folks also exploiting the, hey, look at my non-black partner. Don't we look so interesting and fascinating together? And it's like, do you have a personality? Aside from the fact that your partner is non-black. Question that. Bring me up, Scotty. What I'm specifically talking about here is us seeing kids that present as white using a black ancestor or elder for shock value. Tangent to this whole, I got Indian in my family, my Mima is Cherokee, word to Elizabeth Warren, I love you, girl, but that whole DNA test fiasco, bad look, man down bad. White folks being like, I have a Indian ancestor in order to co-opt scholarships and land. And I want to reference a paper here by Eve Tuck and Wayne K. Young that talks about the idea of playing in Indian and how that benefits the white psyche. And decolonization is not a metaphor. And I'm actually going to quote from the paper here. It says that we observe that another component of a desire to play Indian is a settler desire to be made innocent, to find some mercy or relief in face of the relentlessness of settler guilt and haunting. I think we can extrapolate that to the asphyxiation towards aligning oneself with blackness publicly on a social media app. My question is, if you have black relatives, if you grew up with these black parents, these black grandmothers, it's always a grandmother, it's always a black grandma. What about a granddaddy, baby? But if you grew up with this with proximity to your physical black family, why wouldn't you turn to that community? Why do you need to get on the internet and make a case for your blackness? But I think that quote I pulled is a very intellectual to say that proximity to blackness is cool, but living in a black body, questionable. So the quote makes this case about how white people have situated themselves in proximity to indigenous ancestry to relieve themselves of guilt from their whiteness. On the flip side, people addressing and capitalizing off of blackness because they want to distance themselves from institutionalized anti-blackness. So again, they're capitalizing off of blackness in a way that's accessible to them. And yeah, this does allow these people to avoid and evade how, as white identifying people, they play into systems of oppression or help maintain them. A lot more time gets caught on, oh, I'm black. Look at these pictures of my black parents. Because it's become such a trend, and because, again, social currency. So literally on TikTok, when you get a certain amount of views, you get a certain amount of followers, you get different features that open up to you on the app. You can get into the monetized program on TikTok. You can also get access to the marketplace where you get sponsorships. It allows people to really grow their visibility and grow their brand. And on the flip side, we have people that truly don't have any black heritage who are fighting for their lives, and they are trolling typically other black women and queer folks like Winter from Bad Girls Club, who consistently claims that she gets to identify as black because of a stepfather, and then is consistently trolling, as I said, black women and queer folk who and this is why I don't even engage. I don't even engage with this argument with them, because when you start arguing in somebody's comments, you're giving them views. You're helping them build their brand. Outrage is a social currency, and Winter consistently uses outrage to gain social currency because she's very antagonistic to other black women. It's interesting to watch people fight so hard now to be seen as black because being black is profitable. And it does feel odd to me that we are supposed to just dismiss the history of how having a phenotype closer to whiteness has been very beneficial to people. But now that in the 21st century, hip hop has crossed over as one of the major music genres globally. It's no longer a subdivision. It is no longer just something that this specific demographic in the United States consumes. As more of our culture reaches heights of celebrity, You know, now that we've had a black president, even Barack Obama, as a biracial person, said that he chose to learn about black culture because it was cool. It's illogical to not expect people who had to walk this earth in identifiably black bodies to not say, hold on, wait, huh? I don't think it's wrong for us to be able to call out the way people who have the option of entering in and out this community come in a position as representatives and given power and access and equity that is kept out of the hands of many of us. You know, when I talked about the creolization of American blacks, of the community of enslaved Africans going from identifying with the various ethnicities that they come from in Africa to identifying as Black American or African American, there's also a history of, as there is a history in many cultures and communities, of trying to distance ourselves from a particular phenotype because of how the dominant culture defined it. So that for you to be identifiably black, i.e., you are identifiably African, that means you are a slave. What comes up in one of the books that I listened to on Audible for a class was Wicked Flesh by Dr. Jessica M. Johnson. And she actually goes from the coast of Senegambia to New Orleans. And it's a small part of her book talks about how some enslaved African women would seek manumission via reproduction. That the goal was to whiten your bloodline, your children, so that they could be seen as free. Well, not only that your children phenotypically had a better chance of being perceived as possibly free and not automatically assumed to be slave, but also that via the rights of their father, because in slave times, it was the father who could pass on. So if you had children by white men, you could possibly align yourself with manumission. And this doesn't really happen in the broader American culture. This really only happens where like areas where the French and the Spanish are colonized. Not that it isn't tried amongst British colonies. But it's a very, 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 you know, I mean, we're talking about enslaved people. They didn't really have a whole lot of options. And within that power dynamic, there is no way to really consent. But some would try to position themselves, and this is where we get the Creole community in the Louisiana area. There was a belief that if you could get your children and your offspring to become closer to white phenotype, that they would have a better life than those who had an African phenotype. I mean, it goes so far in Wicked Flesh at the end of the book, there's a court case where a black woman who skews closer to an African phenotype, who had children with what in that time would be considered a mulatto person. In that book, that's what they're termed as, even though that is an offensive term. And he passes away, and she's like, okay, well, the children get his property. And the sister came in and said, those ain't his kids because they too black. And the court said, yeah, they are too black, so they don't get the property. I'm not talking about these things to suggest that this is exactly how life is today, but these sort of things are embedded into the fabric of our community. We have gone through large swaths of our history where it was seen as better to have a phenotype that was closer to whiteness, where black people were consciously making the effort to have more proximity with whiteness, whether it was having children with white people, whether it was raising your black children in all white environments, putting them in white schools. You know, this recent resurgence of a black pride, of Black Lives Matter, of a connection to our ancestors and African community. It's not that this is new, right? Because the Pan-African movement, I mean, you go back to Marcus Garvey, you go back to all the eras, it's constant ebb and flow of distancing and then proximity, distancing and proximity. But this current reiteration of it comes on the end of a period, especially in the 90s and late 80s, into the early 2000s, where there was a very loud messaging that white was right, that proximity to whiteness and moving away from hood and hood nigga things was the way for respectable black people to go. And so now it's interesting to see people fight so hard to be like, no, I can say the N-word actually. I can say the N-word because it gets them views, it gets them engagement, it helps them build brands, and they are getting millions of views. I also, not to say that what would Jimmy Buffett do, exploited. I don't feel like Malia, whatever the biracial girl that got kicked out of Bama Rush. I don't think she was exploiting her heritage, but I do think there's a reason why she was so fascinating for so many people, because it is like, here's a person who can decide how they want to identify. Based on their phenotype, they get to say, do I want to be encroached in whiteness, or do I want to have proximity to my black heritage? And so I think people were kind of watching with the, I wonder if she ever going to acknowledge that she got a black daddy. And it's like, why, as much as other people exploit this, let that child live. Let that child be easy. I'm happy she a real Bama white girl. I'm happy that she with the shits, right? Because there are so many other people that lean into that as a way to build currency. And what would Jimmy Buffett do? Actually got a little personality over there. Okay, she's a little sassy little Alabama girl. All right. I don't know that there is a productive way to end this sort of exploitation of blackness that happens on TikTok, other than to counsel the community of watchers to just not engage with this content. There is no barbecue for you to invite anybody to. You didn't even put anything on the grill, baby. You don't even know how to light the grill up. So stop inviting folks to the barbecue, okay? I think in general, I wish we could move away from this awe we have of white people participating in black culture. Whether it is them claiming to have some black ancestry, whether it is them parading around their black parent, whether it is them joining black sororities and fraternities, whether it is them at HBCUs and on the band lines, like in any way that we can engage, give viewership, help build social currency for white people who exist or try to exist in black spaces, there is always a black person that's been doing it. Not even a person, peoples historically that have been with it. What I'm not trying to suggest that we do is go around to mixed or biracial people and police how they identify. Because what I do truly believe in, why I'm saying biracial people with light-skinned daddies are fighting for their lives on TikTok, is because I know plenty of biracial and mixed people who actually grew up in community with black folks, and they do not, regardless of their phenotype, they do not spend their copious amount of time, they do not create or craft a whole entire brand that, hey, look at me, I'm black. Because as I said earlier in the video, like if you actually grew up and you actually are in community with black folks, you'll just exist in community with the black people. You don't need to get on the internet to validate your blackness in order for other people to let you in, because you're already in, literally, in real life. You are in, you are good. And there isn't, I know people are inclined to want to say, oh, let's gatekeep blackness. And let's say, well, if you don't look black, then you can't be black. But there's no universal way to, why expense that kind of energy? But also, there's no universal way to uphold that, because there's always going to be an outlier. There's always going to be a person who, because we have personal proximity to them, oh no, but you cool, we letting you in. Yeah, I know you biracial, but it's okay, I know you. And it's just so telling that a lot of these TikTokers who have to get on the app and fight for their lives and create brands, well, I'm black, that they dye their hair blonde, that they do various things. It's not to say, oh, you're biracial, you can't dye your hair blonde, but it's just so telling that so many of the women will have blonde hair or not have any videos on their TikTok, no pictures on their Instagram, nothing on their social media timelines showing them with other black women, but they may have a black boyfriend. In a space where there is so much inequity when it comes to black content creators, I would just like to encourage biracial and mixed race people to be mindful of how they use their proximity to blackness in contrast to their proximity to whiteness. Be cautious about how you use that as a social currency, about how much you dedicate your brand to exploiting your black heritage. As a black woman, I pray that none of my future offspring ever use me as a light-skinned relative to suggest that they have a full black parent. I mean, baby, I'm black. Just don't play me like that, please, babes. Please, I will come back out the grave. You know, when your ancestors is coming for you, I'm gonna be one of them ancestors that coming for you over that. If my family happens to go the Diana Ross route and my grandkids somehow all end up being white, babes, please do not use me as the picture that you posting up on TikTok to say that you can say the N-word. It's embarrassing. Future me is already embarrassed. All right. Thank y'all for joining in. Thank y'all for suffering with me through this video. COVID is really messing with my mind, especially with my sinuses. I can't wait to get out of this. But also thank you to Audible for sponsoring this video. I mean, guys, if you've made it this far, definitely make sure you hit the link in the description box to join the SBG book club. And then head on over to audible.com/Julzy to sign up for your first month free, or text Julzy to 500-500. And again, your first month on Audible is free. It's clutch. It's a lifesaver. I love it, and it helps me do so much reading. And thank you for y'all sitting through with me and my very congested self on this video. Holla at y'all later.